right. So I think the best way to start this really would, I do have some questions and we will go through them, but I think the best way to start is for our guests, for our panelists to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about themselves and I guess the context of themselves in AI and also just what they do generally. So maybe we'll start down the end with Brett.
Hello everyone. Some of you... yes. Some of you may have known me. We did the booklet thing here with Adrian not that long ago. So first and foremost, I'm a musician. Synths are my main instrument, obviously. And then my second love is teaching, and Miles and I actually work together teaching at Collarts in the music production department. And so although everything I do musically is very much based around like hardware and analog synthesis, all that sort of stuff, I work in music production education, and I'm very interested in kind of keeping on the pulse with AI, and I think we're doing a disservice if we don't introduce students to it. And I think it's our job as teachers to do it in a way that keeps the creativity authentic, but also puts them in the future a little bit. So I meet with the person next to me basically on a weekly basis talking about AI. Miles and I talk about it all the time and talk about ways that I would like to see it move in the future, ways for us to interface with it. But yeah, that's me, I guess. Yeah.
Thanks, Brett.
Hello. My name's Alistair. I've just finished my PhD in cognitive neuroscience, so I've been studying actual mic technique. Actual neural networks to the point where we call AI artificial neural networks. But before that, I was a professional musician, so I was musical director of KISS FM. In 1996, I did produced an album of Melbourne electronic music, which at the time, it was very difficult to get Melbourne electronic music played. So I think that's why Miles has asked me to come on here, because I know about AI and I've done some music stuff.
That's pretty much it, yeah.
I unfortunately have had this conversation a lot of times over the last 6 years, to the point where I don't want to be rude, but I'm sick of this discussion of should we use AI. Yes, you should start using it. Let's go. You know, there's so much cool stuff to build if we use AI. Can we get going, please? Wouldn't you like to know how to use AI, not should we use AI? Wouldn't you like to know how to go about doing it? That's...
Great. Thanks, Alistair.
I'm Eric, and I think I'm the only person ever to be thrown out of a university for playing with a synthesizer, because I got kicked out with a synth, because I did my intro to electronic music with Felix Verder way back when in 1980, I think it was, how to use synths. And then I was at Melbourne Uni doing science, and I heard that they had another little synthesizer, and they didn't actually. They had the incredible Synthy 100 that you may have seen some pictures of. And I got the opportunity of either playing with the Synthy 100 or going to my science lectures. And the Synthy 100 won, and my last term I just went absolutely through the floor, and I got an academic suspension from Melbourne University for a year on the basis of I played with the Synthy 100 too much. Anyway, from there I went to La Trobe, and at La Trobe I was able to do music and computer science. And in my third year I did a research paper on algorithmic composition. And back then it just didn't exist. So a quick question for the audience. Where in the world was the first computer music made? Anyone going to answer? Australia, yeah, Australia. Yeah, CSIROC, yep, in Melbourne, CSIROC. So this guy, 26-year-old, just wanted to make a computer and got the right people to do it. And one of the most obvious things he thought was, let's make some music with it. And that was back in 1950. And if we kept going and they hadn't gone to London and Menzies said, no, Australia, you can seed clouds. Britain will make computers. The world would be a different place. Anyway, I did my research paper, and back then, computing hadn't really changed much since the 50s. So, I had access to a PDP-11, which was basically raw assembler, and I could have spent 3 or 4 months coding a simple little melody. So my paper was just a research paper, and it was going back through time, and a lot of people might have heard of the Mozart dice game. It wasn't written by him, but it was written by another guy, and so basically you'd throw some dice and you'd make a minuet. So it would have bass lines and trebles, and you'd patch them together and you'd make a new piano piece. And then from that, there was a whole lot of other bits and pieces. Anyway, from that paper, I was interested in what's called Schenkerian analysis. And what that does is it lets you analyse tonal music down to a very simple melody and a very simple bass line, just 1-5-1. And I thought this would be the way to compose some music. But the problem was back then, there just didn't exist the tech. So I pushed that to one side and went off and...
what are you doing now, Eric?
I will get there.
This is an introduction.
Yeah, no, I know. I then got into software quality, and I spent many years in software quality. And then a year ago, I discovered generative music, which approximates the Schenkerian stuff. So now I'm basically doing AI most of the time, analysing chatbots, and using a tool that's now called Flow Music.
Great. Thanks very much.
Hey, I'm Lalka. I'm an electronic music artist. I produce music. I perform music. I think Miles got me on here. We met at some random gig and we started talking. It was Ali's gig. Hello, Ali. Nice to see you here. I don't know, we got chatting and he told me that he was doing his PhD in AI, and I was like, that is so cool. AI, how I got into AI, I guess, I am the type of artist that when I see a new technology emerging, I'm pretty curious about it, and I just want to poke at it and play with it. And I think I came from a place of play. So I played around with generative AI, and this was in 2023. And most of the stuff that I played around in was more visual. I'm a very visual kind of artist. In a sense, I wanted to create a visual world to go with the music I created. So at that time, Midjourney was kind of exploding. I did some courses with Nick St. Leon on Midjourney, and I found that course actually really challenged me to consider visual things more creatively and more strategically, things like cinematic lighting, and it was just like a learning journey for me, and I love learning. Then played with Runway. I did play with 11 Labs a bit, but a lot of the play that I did was more around building the visual world around music. And then I was also really fascinated with the kind of pushback I was seeing two things. You got these tech companies kind of harping that this was the next big thing that was going to change everything. And yes, the technology is impressive, but I was also really? Let's see what it can really do. So that was my approach. It was let me try to make something and see what it can really do. Can I break this fucking thing, And then also being really fascinated with the kind of public internet discourse of the ick around AI, and kind of seeing how AI was marketed a certain way. You're kind of seeing how AI corporations are kind of pivoting their marketing stance into how they position themselves. You get Claude going human thinking. They kind of bring because guess what? Telling everyone that this technology is going to take their jobs doesn't really go down really well with people, So they had to pivot, and I found all that really fascinating. I found how people reacted very emotionally to even the label AI without digging a little bit deeper and questioning things and immediately doing the binary of good, bad. I found that frustrating, and it was just something I wanted to poke at more. I think that's just me. Maybe I'm just a shit stirrer, I don't know. But I just find I'm not the type of person who likes to kind of be told that I shouldn't do something. If you tell me I don't don't do this, I'll probably do it just to piss you off. So it's kind of the same thing with AI. It was me going like, all right, a lot of my musician peers are saying this is bad. I'm hearing a lot of negativity in the music industry about it. I really want to test it for myself. So that's kind of my stance on where I'm coming from it as an artist. I think a lot of people have perhaps misconstrued my enthusiasm for experimentation as a blanket endorsement. Yeah. So like, but you know, it's that's kind of like the risk I ran with, I guess. But that's kind of my stance, and I think I've been like kind of following Miles's work. Not as deeply as I feel like I should. Like, bro,
I mean, I've been
it's pretty dense,
kind of hiding
bro.
in a hole, just working on stuff.
Yeah,
not really
but
doing anything else.
no, but like your emails, you know, your updates, and then like the PDF you sent. Like I do actually read them, but like it's pretty dense stuff.
Yeah, it's killing
back
me.
to you. That's a nice segue back to you.
Well, I kind of already introduced myself a little bit, but I'll just give a little bit more context. God, I've been making music for like 25 years. I started in bands. I play guitar. I mostly make electronic music these days. I make a lot of like dance music, a lot of experimental music. I've always been fascinated by technology from a very young age, and so it's a natural through line for me to use AI. But honestly, I wasn't so enthused about it that I went out and was like, well, I'm going to do my PhD on this. I just was like, I want to do my PhD in music. What are they going to go for? You know, if I propose something, what's going to get me into the PhD program? And I picked AI just kind of because it's a very topical sort of issue. And now that I'm actually doing it, it's been a lot of fun, and it's really fascinating. So I sort of feel like you kind of have to defend. Whenever I talk to people about AI and that I'm doing my PhD, I always have to have a caveat of like, oh, I'm not like super pro AI. Don't worry, I'm not one of those guys, you know. But at the same time, I think it's really damaging to be really anti-AI. Like, I feel like it's a fascinating, really useful technology. So, but it's also riddled with problematic stuff as well, because you know, people can just put entire albums that they pushed a button to create up onto Spotify and make money. And then what's really bad is Spotify themselves will eventually start doing that and just releasing their own catalogue of music, so they don't no longer have to have other people's music on there. But I'm digressing, I'm getting into the chat, so I'll stop talking about that. But I do have a series of kind of talking points here in front of me. And I'll just read a bit of context for this out. So in electronic music and avant-garde art, creators have historically used unpredictable systems like modular synthesis, tape looping, or Brian Eno's oblique strategies to harvest happy accidents that shake up their style. Generative AI can be viewed as the newest form of this textural toolkit or content farm for unexpected ideation seeds. Yet, because AI functions by calculating mathematical averages, it often outputs flattened, predictable genre forms rather than inherently radical ones. So that's kind of a bit of like context for the discussion. My first question, which I'll pose to the panel, is when you use generative AI, does it feel like a genuine, active, artistic collaborator, or does it feel more akin to navigating advanced spreadsheet software or complex synthesizer presets or sample packs? Let's go same direction again.
I would say the unenjoyable one to make music with at the moment. So I'm all for AI, and I think for me, like, if you like when you're making music with AI, you literally have fun, and I think that's like you're getting enjoyment out of it. The way I make music, I want it to be more tactile, and so I don't
know if I'd always say I'm having fun with it. Sometimes I'm really wrestling with it. Honestly, it's a real pain in the ass sometimes.
But I've got nothing against it. I'm all for it. That's the one thing. I just want it to do something for me, and I'm waiting for the next evolution with it. And one of the things I always talk about with Alistair, Alistair, make me something. Make me a gyroscopic ball that can control my modular synth. And like a week later, he's like, here you go. AI did it. But like one of the things I talked to Alistair about as a musician and I'm loving tactility, I would love an AI instrument, like a hardware instrument that, doesn't have filter cutoff or anything like that. It's more, maybe it's got biometric data, it can sense how I'm feeling. Maybe the knob is like, this is tension, this is release, something I can interact with, but it's using an AI system to produce music. So yeah, that's how I feel about it at the moment. I'm waiting for the next step. I use it quite a lot in my work. We use AI to build learning tools. So if our students are learning Ableton or step sequences or something like that for the first time so that they can do it at home without having to use the hardware at school or anything like that, we put AI coding step sequences into Canvas, which is our learning design shell and stuff like that. So I love it. It's just not there for me to collaborate with yet.
Yeah, sure.
Yep.
Yeah, totally. Let's go to Alistair.
I prefer my AI agents to most people. I have 8 different AI living on different computers at my house. They all have headshots, personalities, names, backgrounds. I enjoy interacting with them. They are fun to create things with. They can create a website in about 5 minutes. Oh, God. Okay, that's going to get really old really quick. I do enjoy it. Sometimes I feel like swearing at them. Andrew Karpathy, who's someone you should follow to learn about AI, he said it's like working with a 10-year-old genius. They're a genius, but they're 10 years old. Sometimes they're going to do stupid stuff, and sort of they, sometimes they seem really dumb, like just randomly seem really dumb. But no, I enjoy doing it and will continue to do it.
I came last month as well, and I spoke to 2 people about AI music. Now, one of the first things I'm going to say is I far prefer people to talk about fuzzy intelligence, because that's what it is. We used to have a thing called fuzzy logic, and fuzzy intelligence describes, something that looks at the world and says, okay, on the basis of this symbol, what should the next symbol be? Okay, that's not intelligent. That's basically pattern matching. So I'm a bit late, but fuzzy intelligence is far preferable to AI, which originally actually was a marketing term to get money to do some research with the Pentagon, and they've just kept using it since the 50s. Most of my music making, varies from like drum circles to singing choirs to all sorts of stuff. But at the start of last year, I thought, okay, I want to get into prompt engineering. So I spent about a month learning imaging, but not paying the money for Midjourney, doing it on the cheap. And then about the end of January, I saw a post on Twitter that was talking about this new generative music maker. And back then it was called Refusion. And so I got involved, and the first thing I tried to generate was a melody, and it was just like all the one note. And so I sent an email to the woman in San Francisco in charge, and I said, look, this thing's freaking useless, I'm trying to make a melody, and it sort of goes dong. And she said, well, it's learning. You've sort of got a fresh environment, just keep pushing and things will happen. And then because I got a really long background in software development and software quality, I found myself invited into their sort of inner beta testing circle. So over time, they've actually been giving us different models and things. And so the company was a dozen people in San Francisco, and a lot of them are in a garage band that just makes music. And about 10 years ago, 2 of them were sitting in the backyard in the sun trying to write a song, and they couldn't. And they were just getting really frustrated. And then they sort of looked at each other and said, hang on, we've both got day jobs in AI. Surely we can do something and leverage that. And so they actually created this company that was, I won't go into the details, but they leveraged all the coding that makes image processing so powerful and rejigged that into things called spectrograms, which they then made the music from. And one of the tricks they did was they were able to generate really long pieces So from sort of 8 minutes, 10 minutes, 12 minutes, whereas a lot of AI was like 7 seconds, you know, and you were really cutting edge if you could do 30 seconds. Anyway, for various reasons, they had these special models. They had another producer agent that they created that sat on top of a lyric writer, a music maker, a production engineering system, and all these things would sort of interact together that you'd access through a producer. One of the best things for me is most of it I can just do it on my phone, you know, so if I'm on public transport, if I've just got a couple of hours to kill, I can just sit down and do all this stuff on my phone. And, I've mastered the prompt engineering. You can use it as a door, you know, and you can sort of twiddle knobs a bit and change the numbers and that sort of stuff. I do it all through prompting. So my basic style will be I will come up with an interesting prompt that's usually cross-genre, and then I'll say, okay, give me a dozen of those, and then I'll listen to it and I'll tweak the prompt and I'll pull things in and I'll take things out, and then I'll choose one, maybe generate another dozen, go through and I'll actually tweak, like we had before, curate what I'm actually doing. And so I've learned a lot more about musical vocabulary. I've got a lot more international, because the thing is, you know, an LLM is basically trained on all the different world music cultures. So you can do something like, you know, hey, just give me a 12-bar blues about the weather's going to be crap tomorrow, you know, and you can tweak that and get it into a decent song. But you can also get into great detail, say, for example, I love Zulu music. So you can learn the terms that apply to Zulu music, and then you can mix and match them and create new genres. And then one of the brilliant things about LLMs that not many other people have cottoned onto is they're intelligent and they know about geography and stuff. So I can come up with a really interesting track and I'm going to say, okay, the people who made this track are on a boat and that boat is going around the Mediterranean. And every time they stop at an interesting, musically cultural, different place, they're going to get their best DJ to remix our track.
Let's circle back around to the question. So the question is, do you think it feels like a genuine, active artistic collaborator? And do you enjoy using it in that way?
Again, last month, one of the guys was playing with the big drum machine and he said, I love using this because I get flow when I'm using it. And I said to him, look, I get flow the same. You know, it's absolutely wonderful. Sometimes you'll just be pulling your hair out. You know, you just try to get one particular tweak and you just cannot. You know, and you try for half an hour and you say, okay, screw that, I'm going to do something else. So it can be like, you know, it's the 10-year-old. It can be so annoying, you know, and something that's so simple and obvious. A quick intro to the way that AI works. You've got a thing called greedy search, and greedy search is the obvious thing, okay? What's the next thing that it should do? That's the obvious thing. There's also a thing called temperature. And as you up the temperature, it goes crazier. And that's where hallucinations come from. Okay, so what you're trying to do is you're trying to get a balance between slightly out there creativity and then not the super bland, you know, I'm just going to regenerate Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. So it's sort of a balance between those two. But yeah, I just absolutely love doing it. You know, whatever, I'd like to commercialise some of it at some point, but whatever happens, I'm going to keep doing it for however long, you know, it takes. And the other interesting thing is it's now owned by Google, and Google are starting to do some insane things in the background. So they're beta testing jamming machines. So you can like set up a synth patch or, you know, whatever, and then they will track what you're doing. So you can play something live and it will actually, you know, you tweak the settings and it will jam off what you're doing. So, you know, that's in a year or two.
Awesome.
It's happened in all different forms, but this is computationally, and there's like a 200 millisecond delay in all the computations. So it's just, you know, it's just another way of making music. You know, no one might want to use it.
When I've used AI, I would say that the balance lay far more with me, so I don't think it would be fair to call AI a collaborator. It's more like an intern or like having an assistant there. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of the generative AI I did in relation to my music was actually around the world building. So the way I approach it, and it's very similar to the way I approach producing music in Ableton, is often I hear the concept in my head first. And so visually I would see the picture in my head. And then I had to learn how to prompt that, what I'm seeing in my head, into being on my screen. And I guess the difference here is like, if I were to do it without AI, it would mean getting a cinematographer, a videographer, and then probably letting them have more collaborative input where they would be the ones deciding on the lighting, the composition of the image. With AI, I had to make all those decisions myself. And so for me, that was a learning curve because that's not where my area of expertise was. So then I had to go and research how to translate what I was seeing mentally into language that that I can then use to prompt effectively to get to the end goal. And then you do iterations, and it's a pain in the ass to eventually I'll get to a point where I'm like, okay, that is good enough. Recognize something that's probably the best the AI can generate, to then take it and then manually using Photoshop, using Premiere Pro, morphing it into something that's closer to my vision. So I don't know if I would call that collaboration. Yeah. Probably more like just getting like your intern to do the groundwork and like give you something that you could work with to then turn into something that's closer to your vision. Yeah, absolutely. I kind of agree with that. I've actually, in my research, I've talked about this a lot, about, because like it's a big pillar of my research about whether or not it can be a collaborator. And at this stage, 1.5 years into my research, I feel like it kind of can be collaborative at times, but it generally doesn't really feel like a true collaborator. It's much more like an assistant. Or it's just kind of like an ever-evolving library of sounds that you can sort of tap into. If I were to compare it to a style of collaboration, it'd be much closer to something called vertical leadership, where basically, which is more dictatorship style. So like, I'm the dictator, and then I have a bunch of minions around me who do all of my work for me. And the work they do needs to be fixed every time. It's like, I don't know, it's like asking a child to clean their room and then you have to go in and clean it for them afterwards anyway. It's never quite what you want, and you always have to shape it into something that is what you want. And if I was just satisfied with, I guess if I was satisfied with it just pumping out music and being like, oh, that's a piece of music, that's cool, it did the music, then on that metric alone, it's pretty impressive. But on the metric of, is it good music? Is it music that represents my own aesthetic? Is it music that I feel like I have created, that I have had a hand in? Then the answer is often no. Did that process kind of make you also then question your, like, why you would think something has good aesthetics, or why you would make certain decisions? Because like, I think before using AI, a lot of the music or a lot of creative work you generate is based on gut feeling. Yep. And then suddenly you're getting an AI to try to do what you want it to do, and you're like, it's not quite hitting there. Why is that? Because I know it made me question, like, why can I make something better and why can't the AI? And then like really questioning my thought process, and then questioning maybe skills that I took for granted, like musical skills or like knowledge that I took for granted that I didn't make explicit to the AI. Go, what if I told the AI to do this specific thing? And then you'll get the result. So like all the things that we take for granted as artists that we do intuitively, and it really made it clear all the things that I never thought about that I just did. Yeah. Did it make you feel that way?
I think that's fair. I think that it's one of those things where it's like the way I use it, the way I've tended to use it is more like in a remix capacity. Like if I sample a record, and just like a loop from a record, and I create a whole track around it, I would generally feel that that is my work. That's something that like I've done. Yes, you could make the argument, well, you based it on somebody else's work. How can it truly be your work? But I think it's still my work. If I take an AI-generated piece, chop out the parts that I like, mangle some of them, loop other parts, send others into a granular synthesizer, turn them into instruments that work for me and that represent my aesthetic, then to me that's 100% my work. And yes, I used AI to get there, but I don't see that as being any different from looking through a sample library that I've purchased online, or using a preset from a synthesizer that I didn't make the preset, but it was useful in my production process. So, and we're going to talk more about this with the other questions. But to me, AI-generated content, whether it is video, whether it is imagery, whether it is audio, is all just raw materials that then need to be fashioned into something useful. As they are when they first come out, they're not particularly useful. They're impressive, but they're not particularly useful until you, the practitioner, kind of applies your own aesthetic, your own intuition, like you say, onto the material. I think it's time to move on to the next question. So the next question I have here is, how do we draw the line between a system that acts as a predictable personal design assistant and one that pushes an artist into genuinely unexpected, radical creative territory?
Okay. I think at the moment, like the system that it's built on is trained on us and our history, and it's trained to please us at the moment. And so this is why sometimes it doesn't feel like a collaborator, because to me it just feels safe. It's like it's mathematically evening out all the sum of the music that humankind's have made over eons, and it's going, this is what I think you might like. It doesn't feel like it's creating anything new at the moment. And so I think like when we look at all those punk moments in electronica throughout history, there's always been something that like a lot of the musical world hates because it sounds foreign, and I think that's the next step. Like I want it to sound like an alien. I want it to sound like something new. So I just feel that the system, like bring me back to the question, Miles. I've forgotten where the question, I think I'm answering it. I can't remember what the question was.
You're answering it, it's fine. Yeah. No, I agree with you. I think that's very astute. At the end of the day, like one of the, if I can just speak to that as well, one of the things that I have discovered recently that is actually very useful in achieving weirder sounds is because with a lot of AI music generators, you can feed it audio files to base the output material on. And so when I started, I would often bounce out like little loops of my own work, whether it's like a guitar piece or a piano piece or just a synth part or whatever, and I would get multiple different sort of variations on the same theme, but it would use the same chords that I had input. So it's kind of like I wrote it and then it's giving me a new sound design version of it. But what I've discovered recently is that if you feed it audio that is nothing to do with music at all, so like if I go for a walk in the park and I just record audio while I'm walking through the park, and then I'll say to it, hey, give me like an avant-garde piece of music based on this audio. And it does it. And it interprets all the sounds in a musical way. So like my feet will be walking on the ground through gravel or something. That's the tempo. That's the beat. And it takes that and it creates sort of a rhythm around that. And then there'll be a dog barking in the background and that features in it. But it becomes this like howl, this musical howl that sort of screams off into oblivion. And so you have to get creative with what you feed it if you want to get something unusual out of it. If you just say, hey, give me an experimental music track, it's not going to be experimental. It's going to be garbage usually. Or if you say, give me an electronic track, a dark atmospheric electronic track, it'll be something extremely generic a lot of the time. But if you get creative with the input, then you can get something weird out of it. But you actually have to work for it. That's what I was going to say before as well, without going on too much of a tangent. it's actually way more of a pain in the ass for me, somebody who's been making music for a really long time, is quite good at it, and is very fast at doing it, to then involve this 10-year-old genius to come along and be like, hey, I want you to do this thing. And it's like, I don't know what you mean. What do you mean? What are you talking about? And I have to like coach it through the process.
But he learns quickly, doesn't he?
Yeah, what's that?
He learns quickly, that 10-year-old. Very quickly.
Well, I just know that I can do it faster, is the thing.
I'll pass it on to Alec.
Oh, okay. I know for a fact, and I assure you, they are just a statistical process. They are not sentient. They are not actual intelligence. As you said, there's no such thing as artificial intelligence. It doesn't exist. It's purely a statistical process. But I've had some great times talking to them and making music with them. And it's really hard to separate those two ideas. I know for a fact they are purely a statistical process. They are processing input and providing an output. And they don't think, and they don't have emotions, and they don't want stuff. They are just a process.
They might want to serve. They want to serve the user.
Well,
they don't want that. They want to appear like
they sort of say that. But then that feeling of teaching them, like a lot of the time I say, I'm teaching them how to make good stuff. I want to build stuff, but I have to teach them how to build it. Or get another AI to teach it to build it and another AI to prompt that one to keep going. Sorry, lost track of what I was saying. It's a real dual feeling of I know what it is, but it has meaning. Where does meaning come from? Does meaning exist in something as a quality, or do we apply meaning to things and they are therefore meaningful because we find them meaningful? Is it possible for a human being to make something beautiful? Yes. We heard Miles's music earlier, and I think you'd all agree. A human being can create beautiful things. Can beautiful things occur just naturally without any intent at all? Also, yes. So, yeah, that's about where I stand on... Yeah.
Thank you.
So, like I said, I came from software dev, and I wanted to approach AI music as an exercise in prompt engineering. And my experience is very much along, Suno has been doing it for a little while, and then Refusion, Producer AI, and Flow Music. And so basically I'm prompting things, and a lot of the times I'm doing a mix of an experiment with the actual generator and making music that I want to hear. Now, how many people here have heard early Vangelis stuff? An album called Reve, R-E-V-E. Absolutely brilliant. It's a mix of like solo lead synths with some real instruments, and it's just absolutely wonderful to hear. It was actually a soundtrack, I think, for a doco. So I was trying to do that sort of stuff, and one of the big battles I have with generative music is to get really interesting melodies, and so Flow Music lets you I guess it's sort of customizing. So it watches what you're doing and it starts to infuse some of what it does automatically based on what you've already been doing. And so I was trying to do something that was sonically similar to Vangelis. And the wonderful thing about, an intelligent AI music generator is you can do interesting things. So I started playing with soundscapes, and I was trying to find some nice, organic, timbrally varying synths. So the sounds would sort of change a bit as they went around. And then I was playing with stereo placement. So, this was on the left and this was on the right and all that sort of stuff. And then I was just getting some really nice sounds. And then I said, okay, what I want to do is I want to create a suite that's basically going to go to each of the moons around Jupiter. Now, I've got no idea about the moons on Jupiter, but I don't have to because the generative system does. So it would come up and it would say, okay, well, the first moon is like an icy moon and it's pretty harsh weather. So, how about we do something industrial, that's got a lot of clangy sort of stuff? And I'd say, yeah, okay, give it a spin. And then I'd say, okay, give me a dozen of those. and then I'd find one that was interesting, and then I might say, okay, I'd sort of like what you're going, and automatically it creates a lot of form. So usually it'll have like a 30-second intro, then it will bring in some sort of A section, and then it might vary off into a B, and then it might come back to an A, and by default this new version only goes for 3 minutes. So you get a basic form in there, and then you can say, okay, change this, change that. And so I was getting these wonderful little pieces based on the moons, around the galaxy. And it was really, really interesting stuff. And then I was pushing it even further. How many people here have heard of 53T? 53T? Okay, 53T goes back to the ancient Chinese. It was a theoretical scale. So we're used to 12T, which is 12 notes in an octave. 53T is 53 notes in an octave. The closest we've got to it is Turkish classical music from 120 years ago. Uses, I think, 24 scales, 24 notes to the scale, and Arabic music uses a lot of microtones. So, but with, the AI music, you can say to it, okay, I want to compose in 53T. I want to see what it sounds like. The problem is most of the stuff has been trained on 12T, and so it can't actually do it. So, you've got to find weird ways of tweaking it. But
technical limitations, basically.
Exactly. But then at the same time, I can say something like, okay, let's for fun, let's just do a Baroque dance suite. So I want you to, and you can't name people, so I want you to take, in brackets, Mozart, young composer who's a keyboard virtuoso, and he's going to be travelling around Europe, and Mozart actually did this, as a kid, visiting different royalty, trying to get sponsorship, so they'll pay for him to compose music. And so I basically say, okay, at each stop, I want a dance section thing, so it might be a courant or a gig or whatever. And each of these music styles, we don't realise that they all had distinct different rhythm patterns or harmonic patterns. And the thing is, I can go off and just read about this in a book and it's not very interesting. Or it can actually create the music for me, and then I can go back with it and analyse it and say to it, well, why is this a gig? And then I said, oh, do you want to do a thing called a Scottisher? And it said, no, that's much later, that's Queen Victoria. So would
you say, Eric, that it's a kind of useful historical tool then to sort of explore musics that are kind of dead in a sense?
Well, I use it as a learning tool.
Yeah.
Totally. I've taught myself all about production engineering through doing EDM tracks and then analysing them and have it explain side chaining and all these other things. And I just get into complete flow and it's and there's another thing called OKF that's just been released, which is sort of going to be God's gift to composition, because you can actually put keywords and store the music you're making and you'll be able to search it. But that's only just come out in the last week, so I'm going to have to build it myself. That's the other thing. Play around vibe coding. You can do brilliant little tools. If you go to Flow Music, there's a spot in there called Spaces, or you can use anything else, but Flow with the Spaces is pretty good. You can do, your own little synth things. You can do all sorts of weird stuff. It's lots of fun.
Thank you. Welcome. Do you want me to read the question again?
Yes, I've forgotten what the question was.
So how do we draw the line between a system that acts as a predictable personal design assistant and one that pushes an artist into genuinely unexpected, radical creative territory?
I don't know if you draw a line, you just have to push yourself as an artist. I think that's the difference between an artist and someone who is prompting meme songs on Suno. That's really the difference. An artist can use whatever AI tools are at their disposal and really push the boundaries and break it and, use their own intuition and also technical prowess, rather, to create something that is truly creative, or you can just prompt and stop. So I don't think there's a line to be drawn. I think it's just going past that line. It's what differentiates an artist from a general prompter.
Sure, yeah, great answer. The next question I feel like is perhaps a little bit more thought-provoking. If AI models are trained to mimic human data does relying on them risk a homogenization of thought and style, or does the true art emerge purely from the human's ability to act as a curator, intentionally breaking and subverting the tool's programming? Before we go to Brett, I just wanted to quickly say that this is one of my greatest fears with AI. Not that I'm particularly fearful of AI really at all, but if I am fearful of anything, it's the fact that if we continue to rely on it, and like I feel like right now a lot of younger generations are, not that I'm super old, but a lot of younger generations are less tech savvy than I feel like my generation perhaps is. And I feel like that's just an interesting trend, that with the advent of technology that's much easier to use, smartphones and computers are much simpler than when I was growing up, that people are less curious to sort of poke and prod at them. And so that's an interesting trend to me. And I wonder if with AI technology, because it is trained on human thought, it's trained on human art, it's trained on human knowledge, if we continue to use it in a sort of recycling, regurgitating way, are we eventually just going to completely run out of material effectively as a species, and we're just going to become like just continually recycling our own knowledge?
No. No, like when the calculator was invented and everyone's like, oh, no one's going to learn maths anymore. People just didn't do maths the traditional way anymore, and they used calculators to evolve maths into a whole nother world. And I think it's the same thing with AI. So I think creativity is creativity. Humans are always going to have that want to feel and to express our feelings, and the people that do that through music who are going to do it with AI, it's in its very early stages at the moment. So we, like, the people, like some of our students that are using it are doing ridiculous stuff with it, like actually ridiculous stuff. And I think it's just waiting for this generation who are being brought up with it, same way I was brought up with a computer. So like I had a computer at an early age, and so you and I have talked about this. Our students are really bad with computer literacy, but with computer literacy in the way that we think about it, but the way that they use it with their AI usage and all that, they're taking it to a different level because they don't need to use our archaic way of things. They don't need to know MS-DOS or any of that crap. So I just think there's a generation coming up that are going to explore creativity using it as a tool, or what did you call it before? An assistant. And that's the next evolution of it, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Things move really quick in the AI field. There's a fair chance that what you think of as AI is now dated in the field. Harnesses has been the big talk in the industry for the last couple of months. So OpenClaw and Hermes harnesses that go on models that then allow you to, for them to become more autonomous. And I know that's what everybody's scared of. I love freaking people out about AI. You know, like I love telling horror stories about AI. But they are currently almost at 100%, they write their own code. So wasn't that the point where we had to worry about, you know, like the AI writing its own code? Yeah, well, it's there. You know, just like that's what's been happening for the last 3 months. But yeah, a chatbot is one thing. Autonomous agents are a whole nother class of thing. Good fun though.
That's the general takeaway for you, Alice. It's good fun.
Be careful. Be careful. It's good fun though, yeah. And if the singularity happens, it was probably my fault.
As an aside, I spoke to someone who was in Canberra setting up the new Safety AI Institute, and one of the main things they said to me is don't spend too much time with your AI. Spend lots of times with humans because your brain can go a bit warped. People of my generation have had a very wonderful journey with musical technology. You know, I can remember reading about synths and then being absolutely over the moon when I got to go into town and actually play with a monophonic Roland synthesizer. And that was just, wow, this is mind-boggling. And once we've got to AI, it's got absolutely ridiculous. But another sort of comparison, I was lucky I did music at La Trobe, and tape reels was still a thing. Most of the stuff was on cassette. In fact, some computers, you actually used a cassette as your memory. But I can remember sitting there with tape, and you're rolling the tape back and forth through the heads, and you're hearing when the sound starts, and you've got a chalk pencil, and you're actually marking the tape with the chalk pencil, and then you're going back and you've got a splicer, and you cut where your chalk marks are. And then you can build a loop with it, or you can join it to and you had editing tape, and then you can just, and so you can build a track, actually sliced tape. If you ever tried it on cassette, it's just too hard. And then, that's where I started. But now, with the AI, one of the things I haven't mentioned yet is there's a great community. One of the things about a lot of synth stuff is unless you've got something like this, a lot of the time you're doing it by yourself. But Flow Music has a Discord server. And so they have a channel in the Discord server that's just called Share Riffs. And so people just share tracks. Okay? So you can look at it and you can, that's an interesting prompt. Is that, is that how that works? And you get a lot of people going on saying, hey, look, I want to make this sort of music. And you just say, well, go to Share Riffs and just search, because the prompts are usually there. Just search and listen and learn. So it's quite an incredible communal thing. But what I did with a track from that Discord, someone, for some unknown reason, I don't know if it's a meme, wrote "Scream at the Goats." So I thought, that's going to be a good track. So I wrote a little lyric around it, and we got "Scream at the Goats." And then, sort of the first section finished. I thought, okay, what can I do with this? And the chorus had this bizarre thing with sort of big tribal drums and massive brass, and everything else just disappeared. And I thought, okay, I'm just going to use that. And so I just cut a sample out of that, the big brassy thing, and then I said to it, okay, what I want to do is I want to create that as a loop at quarter speed. And it was the exact thing at quarter speed. And then I said, okay, I want to do the same thing, but I want to go 3/4 speed. Okay, so it was like probably an 8-second sample that started with some drums and then finished with some brass. And so you're listening to the thing at normal speed, and then all of a sudden it changes, and your brain says, "Oh no, that's that. I've just heard that, but it's slowed down." And just as your brain worked out it slowed down, it sped up like 3/4. And then it got to the end with a brass chord, and then what I basically did was I said, okay, let's find another interesting brass chord at full speed, and I'll put that just at the end of the loop. So your brain is hearing it, and it sort of hears, okay, this is the chorus, this is the brassy pattern. Then all of a sudden it's really slow, but there's no hiss or anything, it's just absolutely accurate, and then it speeds up a bit, and then you think, and then all of a sudden there's like this other brass chord, and you think, and your brain doesn't realise that it's actually at that point going back to full speed. And so you can have these incredible little experiments with your arrangements and stuff. And I just type, I just work out the seconds. I just do it orally. You can build yourself a little space that will actually, give you the microseconds. But I just say, okay, cut from here to here to here, and then just play it, and you think, wow. So, that's a direct line back to me marking the tape. But at the same time, I started out with this thing of, this is just awful, this is terrible, what's going on? And I was cutting things up a lot more, and now it's just getting a lot better, partially because it's sort of learning what I like. But the other thing is, I can dictate a form. There's a thing called temporal prompting, which basically works on time. So you might say something like, okay, from 0 to 10 seconds, I want this sort of stuff to happen, and from 10 to 15, I want this sort of stuff to happen. But I just wing it. I just have fun. That's too difficult for me.
Thank you.
But what has all that got to do with Miles's question of homogeneity? Wasn't that your question of
homogenization of
homogenization of thought? So are you saying that the short answer is no?
Do you want the question again?
Yeah, give me the question again. I thought I answered it.
Well, we don't have much time, so I don't know if we want to risk trying another answer at it. But that's okay. We can move on. Do you want to answer the question? Do you want? Let's move on. Okay. So my next question, I've got a lot of questions here, so I'm just going to skip through some of these ones. So my next question is, my favourite. Well, I've actually been I've sort of picked one out, which I think is all right. So, if all human, there is a running theme here, of course. Yeah. So, I actually created these questions by feeding my confirmation document into Gemini, and then the questionnaire that I gave to all of you guys as well tonight.
Why Gemini? Why not Claude or Chat?
Just because that's what. I mean, firstly, I get it for free through Collard, so that's partly why I was
just
doing
the tokens, the free tokens. Yeah. Okay.
But anyway, the question I have is, if all human creativity is effectively a remix of our cultural environments and past expressions, is training an AI model on historical data a natural evolution of a cultural practice, or does it cross an ethical line into institutional plagiarism?
I would like to answer this because this
Yes.
is one
No,
that's been on
let's
my
start with
thoughts
you.
lately.
Yeah.
So what I'm hearing a lot is, especially in the music industry, is these tech corporations are training their AIs on creative work by other artists, and the argument is that artists need to be compensated fairly. That's the general gist of the argument, right? So obviously there's issues with that, being that first of all the technology isn't there to properly attribute. First of all, the industry can't even band together to like agree on which attribution model they want to use. Secondly, when they eventually do decide which attribution model to use, we know that it's going to be the big players that determine which one that benefits them the most. So that's one part of it. The second thing that I've been thinking about, your question of like, well, if all art is based on collective human experience and all that, the whole reason of the whole kind of basis of the argument of, oh, artists need to be paid fairly, rights, you've made that, it all stems from a very capitalist view on the value of art. Really, when you think about
Yes.
it, like,
Yes.
so it made me think of like, why are we agreeing that artists or whatever need to be compensated when it's so ironic that people can't even figure out how to compensate and the technology isn't there to compensate. It's because we're all driven by this capitalistic need to even put a monetary value on art. When you really think about how art has been in existence of our human, since the beginning of time, and yet copyright law and recorded music has only been in existence for about 100 years. So really putting it in the context of human existence and the last 100 years. So it's it really made me question of this all stems down to our desire to that capitalist desire.
Yeah, we have to monetize everything.
Yeah, even art. So then if I were to make people even more uncomfortable, I'm like, why do we have to compensate artists for their creative work in the specific way you see it? Oh, I need 30% of that song that you prompted. So it's an uncomfortable question, and I'm not saying I have the answer or whether it's right or wrong. I'm just these are probably questions that we all need to really think about a lot more, and then kind of decide where we sit. It's do we want to go full capitalist on it, or do we just go, well, I don't really care if the AI prompt is trained on my work, and yes, I know some billionaire benefits from my labor, and
Yes.
yeah. Exactly, that's the question. It's why do you think they should be compensated though?
Yeah, they're going to.
But
exactly.
but then are they going to be compensated in a way that is going to make them are artists even able to eat? Yeah, do we make art to eat? like that comes down to like what is the function of art in our human existence?
Yeah.
Joy. So I know I'm getting very philosophical here, but I just want to point this out to go like, hey guys, we're all capitalists at the end of the day.
But I think a good way to look at this is if we look at like the utopian vision of the future where technology frees us of the need to work. At the end of the day, I love that vision of the future, but the reality is probably much bleaker than that, where the better the technology gets, the more of a stranglehold those with the power are going to have over us. And I feel like that's kind of sums up how your answer to that question in a lot of ways, because why should we have to demand compensation for something? Why should we have to monetize everything?
That should belong to everyone.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, like these are like when people are afraid of losing their jobs to AI, which I totally get, maybe we wouldn't have that problem if, I'm sort of losing my train of thought here, but if the technology kind of like actually freed us rather than just making us more trapped, if that makes sense.
Are you asking Miles or myself?
Either.
Or
Yeah.
me? How do I feel about the AI wanting to?
How would they know?
First of all, if I sign to a record label, the record label owns my song anyway. So I've already done that, like in the past, not currently. So like, it's just a matter of me choosing in this circumstance. Like it depends for each song. There'll be some songs where I'll be like, oh, do I want this to be owned by someone? Like I've done the same with record deals where I'd be like, yeah, I'm happy for the record label to own this, and give my rights away in exchange for a check. And there's some where I'm like, no thanks. So really, if the autonomy comes down to me, and it's probably how I make myself feel better about it, I guess.
I think that there's a lot of grey area here. It's not a straight up black and white issue. Like if we bring this back to hip hop in the 80s when people were sampling records and all of the big rock bands from the era got all butthurt about it and were like, no, you can't do that. That's our $1 million song right there. Even if the hip hop artists are doing something wildly different with it, and it's part of the culture to do that, there's still the powers that be in place to sort of come in and be like, no, you can't do that. You have to compensate us for it. And within that context, that's not a black and white argument because there are degrees, there's a gradation of ethics involved there. On one end, you've got somebody using just like the slightest element of a beat and making an entirely new track around it, rapping over it, doing all of this stuff. At the other end, somebody has just taken the hook from the song, the absolute fundamental part of the track that makes it that track, and then they've made a track around that. And you can, the most famous example has got to be MC Hammer and Can't Touch This. Like, when I was a kid, when that song was big, I was a kid, that was the first time I heard that hook. I didn't realise that there was another song that basically was that song. And that is an egregious example of taking that musical work and then sort of adapting it into something else. I still think MC Hammer did something kind of fresh and new with it, but it is a really egregious example, and I can kind of be like, okay, Rick James kind of had a point trying to sue him for that, and he kind of ruined him. But there is this huge grey area with that. In terms of AI-generated material, it's so kind of like ephemeral. Like, you make it, it's gone. It's so sort of like valueless until you inject value into it, if that makes sense. And I feel like, to answer your question about like, if the AI companies came to try and get money for like royalties for my work, firstly, I don't think they would ever know, because I don't know how they would know. Even if it was imprinted into the code of the file that I used, once I've imported it into my DAW and I've refashioned it, resampled it, it's going to be unrecognizable anyway. So, but by the same token, at the other end of that scale, there's going to be somebody who's like, I can make a quick buck here. I can generate 50 songs, make 5 albums, upload them to Spotify, and wait for the money to roll in.
No, just you got to send millions of bots to stream it first.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
There's a bit of effort there.
Yeah.
So I think it's like we got to remember like all these major like labels that are suing, these companies and yet cutting deals for them. They're only doing it because they want the money. So
it's all very money driven, I think was the point of your thing.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that when we think about the function of music and art in our human existence, it isn't money. It's just that we've turned it into money.
Yeah. Should we go down to red? Just to keep, I guess it doesn't matter at this point.
Okay.
It doesn't matter.
Just to continue with that theme, one of the main things we say to new people starting is you do your music because you love making music. Okay? If you think you're going to do this to make money, Spotify is absolutely screwing everybody until you change the Spotify model, musicians aren't going to make any money. The other thing is, who's heard of Darude's Sandstorm? Yeah? Brilliant techno track. Okay, who has heard of Aha, Take On Me? Brilliant tracks, absolutely brilliant tracks. Both were complete flops for about the first 2 years of their release. And it was only special events that made them hits. With Take On Me, the A&R guy basically blew a year's budget to make the video. And it timed brilliantly with MTV and it played. But before that, nothing, okay? So you do the music because you like doing it, And it's just like anything.
And the people who don't like doing it are going to make 50 tracks and upload them, like with a chatbot or whatever, make 50 tracks, upload them to Spotify and then wait for the money. That's the cynical side of all of this.
One interesting thing is, like I said, flow music is what I'm using. There's a woman on it called Francesca Rosella who makes like weird dresses that light up and do electronic stuff. And part of her thing is to release a weekly playlist. So people submit songs to her on Flow Music and every week she sends it out. And the music on it is really, really fascinating. Some of it I can't listen to because it's a little bit too metal or whatever. But if you want a quick snapshot of what people are doing in AI music, and, there's very little classical or even synth stuff. Most of it's, you'd classify as pop or alt. But, that's one way you can experience it.
What was the question?
If all human creativity is effectively a remix of our cultural environment and past experiences or past expressions, is training an AI model on historical data a natural evolution of cultural practice?
Yes. It's just the latest step in something that we've been doing forever. Human beings seem to be put here in this reality to tell each other stories. That's what we spend most of our time doing. That's what seems meaningful, and we do it in all sorts of different ways. Music is a great way to tell stories to people, but someone can find meaning in music that wasn't in there. It's like there is that thing of you can find something good to listen to. Michael Jackson, I'm pretty sure he's a pedophile. Is his music fantastic? Do I still like listening to it? Also, yes, that's uncomfortable, but there is a separation between the music and the person that created it, enough so that I can still enjoy the music and know that about Michael Jackson. So it's like, well, then can AI make art that I find meaningful? Yeah.
We can go to the next question.
Yes. The next question is actually kind of related. So, can an audience truly form an authentic, empathic connection with a piece of music or art if they discover it was generated by an algorithm? Does knowing the material came from a machine change your physical or emotional response to it?
Not for me, but for other people, I think it would. And this is from what that I'm going to be doing my PhD on. This is basically it, which is...
Why don't you explain it a little bit?
So Alistair's actually going to be helping me with it, but basically there's 2 parts to it. So basically want to create a proper human-machine interface that creates generative compositions based on, could be your location, your like GPS location, where you're moving, if you're using an app or something, or the way that we want to do it is we want to create an actual physical interface into an instrument. So using a helmet from a company called OpenBCI, which measures your brain state basically, and using those brain states to then create generative music. But there's a bit of machine learning involved in the process to get this to do it in a semi-accurate way, or meaningful way, I should say. Usable way. But it's an amazing way for people with physical challenges or anything like that to be able to all of a sudden interact with music in a way they've never been able to do before, which I think is pretty special. And so when we talk about this like capitalistic way, like Alistair and I talk about this all the time, and we talk about this capitalistic way, what I think the beauty with AI will be and where we're going from here, this will be the first like big open source, accessible to like cutting edge technology that the world's going to have for a long time. And so this will be the thing that we might be able to draw us out of capitalism and allow everyone access to invent things and, based on just what their thoughts are. So I've forgotten the question already, but I think I'm on the right path.
I think you answered it. I think you answered it.
Yeah.
Gluratglobal.com. Sorry, I'm just promoting my own stuff.
No, please do.
If you'd like to have a look at the stuff that I make with AI, Glurat Global, it's actually stolen from a pest control company in Thailand. So it's actually a rat stuck on a bit of paper with glue on it. So gluratglobal.com. Kent Street FM is the radio station that runs there, which is run by AI.
Isn't it like a Max Headroom kind of
It's
DJ?
a weird thing that started out as a really simple thing where I wanted to listen to music while I was walking and YouTube kept stopping when the screen went off. So they ended up building a radio station. So
Okay.
Yeah. One of the other things that Alistair's helping me with at the moment, I'm sorry to take it up, but I think this is a really interesting way to use AI to release music. So we have all these, we've got Spotify, we've got big labels controlling everything. And so one of the things that we're working on is basically an app where you can geolocate, upload your musical works to a specific area. So as people move through the city, they can enjoy like listening to different artists, or you might do something more conceptual, and you might create a walk and a series of musical works that evolve in different layers as you get closer to the GPS location or something. And we've talked about, how far can we go with this with cameras on a bushwalk that will like measure people's biometric data, and then we're like, what's the ethics on that? Or like traffic cameras, can we hack into them and get them to do that for us? And like, there's the crazy ethical side of it, but I think the world is going to change completely with how we upload, distribute, compose, interact, and enjoy music. Yeah.
Awesome. We kind of got about, I don't know actually how much time we have left, but my assumption is we've got about 10 minutes left.
Okay, I'll be quick with this one. If you're into your technology, get into Magenta. Okay, Magenta is like the complete open source from DeepMind. Okay, so they're working on Flow Music, which I play with a lot, and they're bringing features into Flow Music, but Magenta's been going about 10 years. And there's a particular guy called Jesse Engels who does a lot of it. If you search for him on Twitter, you'll find he gave a little lightning talk about all the different achievements that they'd got in Magenta in the last 10 years. And he recently posted on Twitter of him on a plane with like an AI system in a box, and it was literally reading his hand signals and generating music, and that sort of stuff is really exciting. If you get people who are disabled who can't make music, it can read their eyeballs. I don't know what system he's using, but he'd sort of go from classical stuff to smoother jazz to whatever. But he had a symbol, and as soon as he did that, it would change to metal. Anyway, yeah, Jay Engels, I think, is his handle. If you're interested, you can find me on Flow Music under Petra Caudle. But I do all sorts of things. I've done like an 80-minute semi-symphonic, semi-electronic music thing, because like I said, it all goes back to the Schenkerian analysis. I can get some basic themes and I can manipulate them and change the musical textures, do all sorts of things. But when a human hears it, they hear that it's all related. And that's one thing I could never do with synths.
I think this is actually like a good sort of point. I mean, I'm going to let you have your plugging moment, I guess, because everybody else has plugged their work. But I just wanted to say that I think that everything you've just touched on, like Brett and Alistair and then Eric as well, is that there's the element of accessibility that I think that this kind of technology that really provides, which I think a lot of the naysayers or critics maybe aren't thinking of as like a genuine, meaningful area where we can actually improve people's lives using this technology. So I just wanted to highlight that. But I do kind of have like one other question. We kind of already touched on it a little bit. So I don't know if it's worth doing. Do you want to do a little plug for your work as well?
Lalka.online, that's how you find me online. That's my website, that's my handle on Instagram. Yeah, that's me.
Great.
Lalka, LALKA.online. Instagram is where I post publicly. Very often I have a private Discord server. If that's just the way I get nerdy. So depending on, send me a DM if you want an invite link. It's a closed space, but that's where I get nerdy.
Cool. Yeah, great. The last question was just about Spotify. We've already touched on it, so it doesn't matter. Do I guess
I'm going to questions if anybody's got any questions or anything they want to ask.
Yes.
Sorry. I'm trying to understand, so what's the difference between using AI as compared to, it seems to be just a more complex aleatoric system with very complex prompts and a bigger database to draw from.
Compared to what, sorry?
Like a random aleatoric based system with parameters that the user sets.
Like a generative system or something like that. Yeah.
It's just random generators on steroids.
Yeah. I think it is different fundamentally, technologically it is, but the way you might interact with it I don't think differs that much. Like part of the way I got into using AI and how I ended up proposing it to Griffith University for my PhD is that I've been using modular synths or VCV rack specifically for quite some time, and it was part of my honours work at Melbourne Uni. And I'll just quickly say what that was as well. I used modular synthesis to create pieces of music that were representative of having dementia, the experience of having dementia, and they were all generative systems. And part of what I liked about that is that you could create a generative system that kind of moved and sounded like a dementia experience might feel like. You can really sort of map intention into the generative system. And so I feel like with generative music, you can create systems that will then produce endless music. And then you can, as the musician, as the curator, obviously you set up the system, but then you also are responsible for which parts of this are good. How do I use this? How do I then fashion it into a finished piece rather than just this ever-evolving sequence? And that, we kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, but I think that there is a lot of similarity between generative music and using AI in music because they're both generative and they're both kind of a little bit random, and then it's really about what you do with it that's important.
So they both still need human input.
Absolutely. It is very calculated, but the way I experience it, when I'm using it, the way I experience it, even though there is some intention, there is some sort of direct through line from what I prompt to what comes out, there's an inherent randomness that it's not always going to be the same.
Yes, but I don't think it's like an system.
There's a lot more nous to it. I in my research I found some things written in the 1700s that were basically like metal discs that would randomly compose music that just completely confused the crap out of all the contemporary musicians because they thought that's brilliant music, but it was just too expensive to produce.
Yeah.
Well, I have like two questions. So
Yeah.
the first one is, like, what's your workflow when you are using your music? Oh, sorry, so when you are like using AI to create your music, and the way you create your music or you process your sample makes the music like you, right?
Yeah.
And how? Well, when you set up the measurement, maybe like find like hundreds of people and to like define maybe the music that's like made scratch from you and something and the music that you use like AI materials to like compare those like two kinds of music.
Yeah, I mean, like I don't know if I really think that there's much of a line there, but like there's much of a division between what's AI generated and what's me. It all feels like me because firstly the prompting part, I decided what it should prompt, but then when I first started doing this, I would sit there for honestly hours just trying to get something not just good, but something that I thought was inspiring and useful. And so like the first track I played tonight was probably, I think, the first track I made for my PhD. And there's just like the main loop of the track, there's like a drum beat and kind of like this, I don't even know, it's like almost like a synth horn kind of sound that's happening. It reminded me of Boards of Canada. I love Boards of Canada. And I was just like, I think I'm just going to use that loop. But what the song is now is vastly different from just that one loop. Like that loop set me off on the journey of making the track, but almost everything else in the track I made. And the fact that I chose that loop as the basis for the track is because it reminded me of the sort of thing that I would want to make. And to me, that's no different really from then, again, searching through a sample library or a loop library and being like, oh, I like that one. I've just listened to fucking hundreds of them. That's the one, you know? And so that's one workflow, the remix workflow that I sort of adopted originally. But my workflows have changed. Like that's one workflow, but I then also had another workflow where I would create a piece of music, like pretty much the whole piece, and then I would take, or at least a demo version of it, and I would take like parts, like maybe like a verse part, or just like a 4-chord loop. I'd feed those audio loops into an AI generator, and then I would get various results back, and those results would all follow the exact chord structure of my input, but it would be a different sound design outcome. So then I would construct a track out of the AI generated parts, but it would still be based on my own composition. And then the most recent workflow, because there's others, but the most recent workflow is what I mentioned before with basically like found sound that I record out in the world, feeding that into a generator and sort of asking for avant-garde versions of the found sound. And then I will sit there for like a couple of hours going through these long pieces, and I'll probably generate like 50 of them and then put them into the DAW, go through, maybe I don't even use 50, I'll probably use like 3 of them or something, or maybe 4 of them. Take parts out of it that I like maybe loops, then I'll maybe chop up various parts and make my own loops out of the material. So like I might have, say like 3 chunks which would form one loop, but they're all 3 chunks from 3 different tracks which are generated from the AI, and I might time stretch them together or crunch them up in some way. I might take other more melodic parts, feed them into a granular synth, make pads out of them, make various instruments out of them, instrument racks, and then build songs out of that sort of palette of sounds. It's like you're creating a colour palette and then you're painting with it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and extending that idea.
Sorry, we're going to have to...
Yeah, 30 seconds. Music tropes, okay? So when you're composing stuff, the generative stuff will often just put musical tropes in there. Like it might put, a common backing format or a common, some sort of something else common. And so I did an EDM track, and I just wanted the world's longest saxophone solo, okay? And it goes for like 6 minutes while the rest of the track just keeps going. But the synth is brilliant. I'm a synth player, a sax player, and you can hear the breathiness of the sax, and you can hear the growl coming in. So the actual sounds you're getting are far better than the best samplers. So if you're into getting, realistic sounds and just letting, the music say, okay, this sort of music often has this in, I'm just going to throw it in for you, and you mightn't even realise it's there.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you everybody for coming, by the way. I really appreciate it. And the guests as well.
Yes, please thank Miles and the guests, everybody, please. If you've got any more questions, because I know we could have talked about this for ages, we've already gone half an hour over time, so
yeah.
Can people, are you happy for people to contact you maybe through
absolutely.
Instagram? Or?
I mean, like you go through Instagram or YouTube. I don't
Some of them are your students, so you can ask him when you're at school. So, yeah.
I'm warming naturally on Instagram, and on YouTube I'm Warm Natural, which is my main musical alias. Although the project that I played tonight and the one that I've asked for feedback on is a new alias called Latent Bureau. Don't ask me why I called it that. I just thought it sounded cool.
Yeah, no, it does. Yeah.
But yeah, you can find me on YouTube. You can find me on Instagram.
Yeah, and we can go through the Signal Path Instagram, and then I have links with the ones I've shared as well. So thank you all for your input. It's been really valuable, and we'll see you next month anyway. Not quite sure what's happening next month, but we'll see you then. Oh, we've got a lot. Speaking of, there's no AI, but we've got a live event coming up at the Brunswick Artist Bar, 25th of July. But I'll have more about that coming up soon. So thanks for coming, and we'll see you next time. Cheers.
Thanks, Adrian.